Welcome to Tactical, everybody. This episode is brought to you by Poopin' at Work. Save money, save time. Let the moose loose on the company dime. Today's video is going to be another educational video about a topic that I have extensive experience in and get questions about a lot. And that is, in particular, what to do with salvaged OEM motherboards that you totally won't drop for this shop. They come with a great number of tits and tats and trips and traps and other things that make them a little bit less desirable than consumer products. So let's go over those today to make sure that you can get the most out of your recent secondhand garbage bin purchase. Number one, first and foremost, you want to investigate the form factor. As you can see here in my hands, this is just a standard micro ATX motherboard that just happens to be OEM. All the screw holes are in the correct places. This will be mountable in any ATX case, but there are plenty, especially those that come in what are known as small form factor or super small form factor, sort of pre-built half-height desktop PCs that have custom motherboards, very akin to what you might find on a laptop. And those will be a little bit more difficult to accommodate in a standard case. So try your best to avoid those. The nice thing about these pre-builts is that a lot of them have case tops that are poppable without any screws or any tools whatsoever. So you can always take a peek in when you go to your local e-waste depository and see exactly what you're buying before you buy. Tip number two, I/O shields. Make sure that the I/O shield on your particular pre-built that you're trying to tear down is actually removable, just like this one. Now, does the absence of an I/O shield mean that a motherboard is unusable? No, but if you're building something for someone else or for resale, it might be advantageous to make sure that it comes with one rather than something that's fucking hard cut into the case. Tip number three, mounting holes for the cooler. This is a big issue with a lot of OEM boards. You have to make sure the holes are in the standard place so that they can accept an Intel stock cooler. Or, as is the case with this board, you need to make sure that you can salvage the included cooler, that the fan is working, or that at least you can get a replacement fan for it, and that everything is in good order. Tip number four, power connectors. This is a huge one and a very common mistake that a lot of people make when they buy these things. In any event, the power connectors, as you know, should look like this. We should have standard 24 or 20, maybe 20 is passable, but you won't find motherboards with 20 anymore. 24 pin ATX power connections, plus the CPU power connection should be 4 or 8 pin somewhere over here. Now, if you have component level experience, it's really not that big of a deal because you can just switch cables around and make it work. But for the average hobby builder, it's obviously something that you probably won't want to encounter if you can avoid it. So don't. Numero cinco. Why did I have a Japanese accent when speaking Spanish? That's some kind of multi-layered racism right there. Anyhow, tip 5 is the fan headers on the motherboards. You may not be able to see this, but I'm going to try my best with my shitty camera work here. You see that? Sorry for my bad lighting. That is a fan header on this Dell motherboard. That's a 3-pin actually, and there are 4 pins on this board as well. The bottom line is they're just slightly different. They're spaced a little wider, the pins are, than from a standard configured motherboard, and they have this like black vagina around them, sort of like you slide the fan plug into. Bottom line is you kind of have 3 choices. Either one, avoid it altogether and find OEM motherboards that have standard fan headers. Number 2, you can do some soldering work on the wires. So you just save the fan pluggy bit and then cut the wires and solder the wires onto a standard fan. That will work as long as you, of course, you get your colors right. Or lastly, just be prepared to build a super simple system with like one Molex powered fan or like a fan hub or something. There are ways around it, but just be mindful. What are we on now? Tip 6? Tip 6, if you happen to get a system that has a K SKU CPU in the motherboard, take it out and sell it separately and put a non-K CPU in these boards because almost all of them are Q series chipsets and do not allow for overclocking anyway. So unless that chip has a very high stock multiplier as it is, that you can just crank up to its maximum in the BIOS, it will not allow for proper overclocking. So you might as well just flip this more expensive CPU and get something cheaper to throw in here. Tip number 7, check the capacitor quality. Now, OEM boards are not as complicated and detailed and refined as consumer motherboards that are meant to be sold to people who know what they're looking for to some degree. And the capacitors on many sections of the motherboard will not be all solid. They will be liquid electrolytic capacitors, and they of course will be prone to swelling and bursting. So check them all out. You can tell a swollen cap very easily. Just look at the top. It looks kind of bubbled up at the top where there's a T or an X that's kind of going like this, and then occasionally they'll be actually bursting out and brown residue will be sort of gooping out the side. Avoid that, or be prepared to replace them. They are very easy to replace, but if that's not your bag, just avoid them altogether. These motherboards are typically not built for high stress environments. They do have components that last not quite as long as something you might buy in a consumer board, so just be mindful of that. Tip number, whatever number I left off at, I can't remember, is watch out for the front I/O headers. Now, the standard configuration these days that almost, if not all motherboards are now adopting is the 9-pin configuration that you're probably used to. But that is not true for OEM boards. In fact, some of them are wildly different. In fact, this board that I've been using as an example has a 5-pin connector up here for, I believe, reset and power on, and the lights, both HDD activity and power LEDs, are in this little special Dell proprietary header down here. Speaking of, that brings us to tip number 10. And tip number 10 is keep all the front shit that you find in the case when you pull the motherboard out. What do I mean by front shit? Well, Dell has all sorts of unique little doodads and sensors in their computers, as do many of the other makers. Things like temperature sensors and case tamper fucking sensors, like if ever the case is popped off. And they connect to various headers on the motherboard, and if those cables are not connected, the computer will not boot. Now, in some cases, with older models of Dell systems, you can override these features in the BIOS and you'll be fine. But in the case of this board, it absolutely will not allow you to disable them in the BIOS, so you either got to go find a custom BIOS that some guy has hacked, or deal with the fact that every time on startup, you've got to press F1 before you get into Windows, which can be kind of annoying. Again, not a problem if it's a personal PC. You know, you can just hit your F1 and be on your way. If it is for repackaging and resale, someone's going to go, oh, I don't have to press F1 every time I boot up the computer. And you'll be able to explain to them why. It's because I'm a fucking idiot and bought the wrong motherboard. But the point is, if you keep all that front shit, all the cables and connectors, you can kind of just put them back on the board and then stuff it somewhere in the PC where no one would ever see it. The same actually applies to the fan headers. Sometimes the fan headers are included in that fucking big rigmarole, so you got to have those connected too. So it might also be a good idea, in addition to keeping the front I/O and all of the USB connectors and whatnot, to keep the fucking fans that come with the pre-built as well and use those throughout the case. Anyhow, that's a video. Right? I still make videos. That's a video. Boring video. Useless video. But it's still a video. Anyhow, I'm going to start mixing up the content soon. I want to keep making videos, but I'm kind of getting tired of this shit. And second of all, I'm maybe, sort of, possibly, almost certainly actually going to be moving far, far away from where I currently am. Which means I'm going to have to switch up the content, because the place where I'm going isn't exactly the most lucrative when it comes to secondhand computer components. As for what content I will post, I really don't know yet. And we'll see, I guess, depending on how things progress over the next few months. But it's exciting times. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm sticking around. I'll be back. Just chill out for a bit. Stick with me. Follow me on Twitter. I never thought I would say that, but really, seriously, follow me on Twitter. I'm very, very funny when contained to 3 sentences or less. Anyhow, don't forget to like, subscribe, and fuck off or die.